the fact that I started my career 25 years ago, almost 25 years ago. I've been doing 3D for a little bit longer than that. And it's been kind of interesting because I look at where my career was back then and what I did to get to where I was. It's a lot of hard work, there's a lot of persistence, a heck of a lot of failure, but it was very different to if I were to start today. I think that back then the industry was tiny. There were very few studios, there was no internet. I think now we've got a lot more opportunities, but there's also a lot more competition because of that too. By the way, as I mentioned this, I'm going to do a bit of Q&A at the end, so if you guys have questions, feel free to drop as many questions as you can into the chat, as well as if you can like this video. The reason I mention that is because I want to get into a daily habit of doing these, but I only want to make sure that this is something that you guys are able to consume, and if it is, you know, by gauging it through likes or whatever, that'll give me a chance to kind of get a better idea whether to kind of keep this up. So that'll be the main thing, and like I said, feel free to drop as many comments and questions as you like, and I'll make sure to respond to everything at the very end. So, as I mentioned before, I think the key thing is that in 2019 compared to, God, how long ago it was, like 96, I think, it would be a very different approach now if I were to start out. And I thought that would just be an interesting insight to actually talk about, is how I would do it if I was starting from scratch now in my career and I wanted to fast track my career into getting my first job. And that's something that I'll just mention for a second that I've wanted to do for the last 2 years. I'm just trying to finish up live action series and a few other things this month, and then I want to start focusing on that. Is I want to really focus on how to get your first creative career breakthrough, because I think that once you're in, once you get that momentum, everything changes. But in the very beginning, I know the struggle, and I was talking about it yesterday in the live stream that I did. I know the struggle so well that a lot of us tend to... Sorry guys, I'm just looking at the chat really quick, making sure you guys could hear me. Yeah, I know that the struggle for me was, the pain point was like the rejection, the keep firing out those reels into the abyss, hoping to get something back. And there were so many times that I wanted to quit, that I wanted to give up, just because I felt like if someone just gave me that chance, I would be able to make it. But until someone gave me that chance, I was stuck just working day and night trying to get that reel, that one reel that would get me the job and get me in the door. And as I say this, it was just kind of funny. Like, I remember having a conversation with one of the supervisors at Blur Studio, and he told me how he got rejected like 12 times from Blur, and he kept applying and kept applying. Finally, the thing that actually got him the job, and I confirmed this with Tim Miller, I was like, did this guy really do this? And he's like, yeah, he did. I totally forgot until now. But what he actually did was he attached a dollar bill to his resume, and he wrote on it, is this what it's going to fucking take to get me a job? And I guess they liked his sense of humor, so they're like, all right, fine, we'll give him a chance. And he's been there now for, God, about 15 to, no, at this point it'd be about 20 years he's been there. So, I don't know, maybe that's the secret to it all. But before I get started, one thing I wanted to mention, because this does apply to all of you guys, is I've got a free visual effects class at the moment you guys can sign up to. It's 8 videos long, you get all the scene assets, the video footage, everything to take a shot from start to finish. You go to vfxcourse.com. I just want to mention that because everything that I'm about to talk about applies to that as well, to take a shot, put on your reel that demonstrates that you can do what we're talking about. So if you guys could do me a favor and just type that in the chat, that way it might be easier for everyone else, just vfxcourse.com. The first thing I think that's really critical, and we'll dive into it all now, I just want to give a chance for everyone to get in here and get settled. So I think the key thing for all of us is to really know the lay of the land. In other words, we need to set our goals in the beginning. Our goal is just to initially get in the door, okay? And from there, we can start to have the success that we want. But as I mentioned before, the hardest part is actually getting that initial win, getting that person to take a chance on us, whatever it might be. And the key to actually getting our first creative career breakthrough is there's 2 levers to it. And I talked a little bit about this yesterday, and that was your demo reel and your relationships. So in other words, you need to have a demo reel, because without having a reel, you can't demonstrate that you can do the work. There is a bit of a misconception that a lot of us think that having a degree or some piece of paper might land us the job. And I just want to be clear about that for anyone who still thinks that. You need to be able to prove that you can sit down tomorrow in a chair and be able to do the work. And having a piece of paper is not going to show that you can draw. Having a piece of paper doesn't demonstrate that you understand color theory or perspective, or you know how to take a shot to final and have the confidence of the director when they're looking over your shoulder trying to get these shots out the door. So I think that's really critical for all of us, is to understand that a piece of paper isn't going to get you that, whereas your demo reel is the only thing that's going to prove that you can do the job. But at the same time, if you don't have those relationships, then who are you going to be sending your demo reel to? Okay, so that's the key thing that if you look at right now, and when I say 2019, the most relevant problem I think we all have is that there are so many people coming out of schools every single day. As I mentioned yesterday, it's comparative to the amount of jobs coming out too. So it isn't like 200 million students are coming out of the woodworks every single month and the amount of jobs aren't consistent with that. There's so many more jobs, so many more opportunities today than there were ever before. And not only that, but they're global now. So it doesn't mean that you need to be in LA, New York, or London. You can be in Vancouver, you could be in Hyderabad, you could be in Sydney, you could be literally anywhere in the world. And on top of that, we have the internet, which opens up the entire landscape even further. So that's something to consider, but to also consider that there are a lot more people applying for jobs now than ever before as well. So we need to consider the fact that even though there's more opportunities, there's also more people coming out. But what it really means is that you've got to figure out a way to rise above the noise. And that's what I mentioned yesterday, is that being talented right now isn't enough. Because just showing up and having the ability to do it, we've got to figure out ways to be creative and go around that. There's a demo reel guide that I put together a while back, and I mention this because, again, now in my career, being on the other side of the table, where I'm usually the person who comes in and builds my team that I want to work with, it's one of those things. I think most of us are very naive to the fact that when we send our demo reel in, we just assume that it's going to be watched. You know, we work on our reel day and night and we mail it in and we think that, cool, now I'm just going to sit back and, cross my fingers and hope that, my reel's good enough. And if we're not being creative and hustling a lot more with how we send in our reel, in other words, we're going through the same channels as the other thousands of people are doing as well, all sending it to HR or filling out a job application form, then we're all falling in the same bucket. And I've seen so many times where HR, because keep in mind, they're not the people who have been working in 3D their entire career. They're usually someone who is more management and is trying to find who to mail the spreadsheet of artists to in which department. And if it's not clear, or if they don't understand, they look at a reel and think, oh, the animation's really great, and they send the animation to, they send like the effects reel to the animation department, thinking that it's for animation, or whatever misunderstandings can happen, and believe me, there can be so many. You got to understand that when the effects department gets the animation reel, they're going to say, this is animation, and throw it out. And that's that. And there's so many different ways that your reel can just never show up. Maybe it just never makes it. Maybe it just kind of ends in the gray area where they're just looking for the best, the right criteria at the time. So there's all these different factors, and that's why it's so critical for all of us to have that network of people. And again, we don't want to be doing that later in the game. We don't want to get to the point where we finally finish our reel that we've worked 2 weeks on to 2 months on, and it's finally done, and then we start looking at, well, Allan said I should mail this out to key people so that way I can get a more niche audience that's more focused on my stuff. I better go do that now. We need to be doing that ahead of time. So again, this is why it's so critical for all of us to be thinking ahead. We got to be creative with this, because again, if you do the bare minimum, you're going to get the minimum results. So it's really critical for all of us to front load the work and think ahead and try and set ourselves up for those wins the whole time. So as I mentioned before, our initial goal is always going to be, at least for me, if I were to try and get a job right now, this would be that I would just want to get my foot in the door. It wouldn't matter how I would do it, it would just be a matter of getting that initial win. Once I'm in, that's when I can do the damage. So I think of, terrible analogy, but Game of Thrones. I think it's season 2 that Khaleesi and all those guys rock up at Karth, and they're in the middle of the desert, they're dying, and they find this giant wall, and inside of there is this, you know, really luxurious city and all the wealth and beauty and everything that they could ever imagine. And all these people roll out and they say, like, what's up? Prove yourself that you can actually get in. Prove yourself that you're worthy of coming in here, and why would we let you in when we've turned everyone else away before? If you think about that in the same way that with our demo reel, I like the story of, not to give anything away, but what would be the first king of Karth, if he didn't get locked up in the safe or whatever at the very end. But the first king, he told his story about how he initially arrived with nothing. He was a nobody, he showed up and managed to, you know, get in, and then from there he built himself up to potentially being the first ever king of Karth. And it's the same way with us. Like, who cares how you get in, whether you come in as a render wrangler, client service, whatever it's going to be, that doesn't matter. It's about once you get in, you can course correct. I've had friends of mine, students of mine, who've gone in doing roto. And from there, they're like, okay, cool, now I can move into compositing. Cool, now I can move into 3D. But at least once you have the face time, the attention of other people, that's when you can start to do the damage, the hustle, and go to phase 2 of all of this. But when you're on the outside of that wall, it's just about trying to get that penetration, trying to get in to the other side. So I think that's the really critical thing to understand, is that if you're on the outside, then you're still going to be fighting to try and get that first win. So I think that's really critical. So the other thing I want to mention is that what you know before you ever start your first job doesn't matter as much as what you'll learn once you get in. So in my career, the first 5 years I freelanced, or the first 4 years I freelanced from home. And I worked on Half-Life and a lot of other big video games. I did crappy websites. I did a lot of different stuff. But I can't compare that to the first 2 weeks of working at a good studio with talented people. So the first 2 weeks I learned so much more than I would have learned in that 4 or 5 years on my own. Okay? And the reason for that is that now that I'm in, I'm seeing the magician behind or the wizard behind the curtain, right? I'm seeing all the things that are happening and how they work. The guy next to me, I talked to him a lot, I talked about him a lot on my podcast, Scott Tansley, and recently I got to thank him actually for helping me when I was 18 years old. He would not shut up. He was just this older guy, like 45, 50, been doing 3D for a long time, started out drafting and doing more architectural stuff, and he wouldn't ever shut up. He was just this talk all day long. Thing is, he was such an amazingly talented guy, and I was such a big sponge for knowledge. It was great. He would just drop so much valuable information on me all the time. And then I'd go to lunch and hang out with people. I'd learn from them as well. And everywhere I went, I would continue to learn and develop myself. My reel got better. As I always say, your first reel is a throwaway, because once you get in, that's when it all changes. Then you can throw out all your crappy work and you get to work on real productions with real people. But in the beginning, everything that I'm learning is irrelevant compared to when I get in. So again, I can't iterate enough or reiterate enough how important it is to just get in the first place. So what you know before you're in compared to what you know once you're in is completely and vastly different. So just for anyone joining right now, I just want to mention I'm going to be doing these daily. I'm going to be trying to make these about 25 minutes each. One thing I mentioned before was just, again, related to this, is vfxcourse.com, if someone wants to put that in the comments. But the reason I'm mentioning that is just because I'm going to only keep that up for a little while longer. It's a 18-hour, 8-video free VFX class. So I want to mention that just because, again, everything that aligns with what we're talking about today is applicable. You know, taking a really good rock-solid VFX shot, putting on your reel, that's what you need over anything else. So again, if you want to check that out, go for it. I think the key thing, though, with what I would suggest doing is always to learn with intent. So in other words, I got an email a couple weeks ago, and this guy was like, you know what, Allan, like my big goal that I want to learn is I want to work at ILM. And so I'm going to go and I'm going to learn Maya inside out. I'm going to learn everything about it so that way I can get a job there. And I had to burst his bubble and say, well, what do you think, you know, spending a year or 2 or 3, I mean, shit, I've been doing this for 20 years, I don't know Maya inside out, but devoting all that time to learning a package inside out, how is that going to move the needle? How is it actually going to get you the job? You might be a walking encyclopedia, but how are you demonstrating your skills? All these different things. And do you even know if ILM uses Maya? They do use Maya. They use it for animation, but that's it. They don't use it for anything else. So if you're trying to get a job as a dynamics person or something like that, you might need to demonstrate different abilities. You might need to do your research. So again, learning with intent, I think, is the most important thing. So I always talk about, and I coin phrase this, but results-based learning. So in other words, I want to learn just in time rather than just in case. I'm not going to start learning a subject that may be useful to me down the line when my goal right now is to get that first win, to get in the door. Because like I said before, everything I know right now is irrelevant compared to being on the inside. So once I get on the inside, that's when the real learning begins, and I don't want to delay that any longer. So in other words, everything that I'm learning now should be specifically focused on my reel. You could have a new demo reel from scratch within 2 weeks. All it takes is 2 to 3 shots. You've got everything you need to get a job. I know people who are working on their reel for 1.5 years, and I'm here to say that is bullshit. You don't need that long to make a reel. Okay, all you need is a couple shots to demonstrate what you can do. The longer your reel, the more chance you have of people actually turning it off. And again, I talk from experience because that's what I do. I sit in a room, we look at reels and say, hire this person, these all suck. And I've seen so many times that someone has a cool reel, I love it, there's one shot in there I don't like, but the other supervisor is like, yeah, that one shot is what decided to take that person from the top of my to hire list to the bottom, because that makes me question whether they're able to complete any shots on their own, or whether they just had a really good supervisor and that's why their work is so good. And there's all these different things that happen in the background. The thing is, you're not in the room to defend yourself. You're not there to say, well, you don't understand, like, I put that shot on because I needed filler or whatever the excuse is. You're not there. So in other words, instantly being dismissed, there's no way to defend it. Okay, so keep that in mind, that all it takes is a couple of shots. That's all you need. And when it comes to learning all this stuff, you should just be focused on what you need to make a reel. In other words, if I decided to make 2 cool shots, one's going to be a building blowing up and the other one's going to be a car smashing into a wall. Great. Well, I'm going to go and start looking up, how do I destroy buildings? How do I rig a vehicle? How do I do the deformations when the car impacts on the wall? All the bits and pieces necessary for that. I'll cut all the other fat because I can learn that stuff later, but right now I need to focus on what's going to move the needle. In other words, what's going to get me there. Learning a software package entirely inside out, that's not going to do anything for you. Being able to demonstrate what you can do and prove that you can sit down in a chair tomorrow and actually do the job, that's what's important. And that's why when I look at people's work, it's cool to have an explosion on black or have a walk cycle, but we don't produce walk cycles, we don't produce explosions on black, we do completed shots. And that's why I'm going to sound like a dead horse, I'm going to say the VFXcourse.com, that is taking a shot from start to finish. That's why I keep mentioning it, because with all of this, it's all about taking a shot from start all the way to completion. Once you can prove that you're doing what they do, it's a no-brainer. And that's what we want to do. We want to set ourselves up for the win, where they look at what you're doing, they're like, this is exactly what we do in our productions. It changes everything. So I was in Montreal last weekend. I was with one of the directors from Lucasfilm, and we got into the subject of something that we both have heard before, and neither of us really agreed with it. We don't know where it all originated from, but we're both talking about how it's one of those rules that studios don't like to see you mimicking the stuff they do. That's what we both have heard, and I think it's bullshit. I think that I completely disagree that if you're applying at ILM, don't do any Star Wars work because they're doing Star Wars and they hate to see their work being mimicked. That's the rumor, that's the mindset that people have. The thing is, if I'm doing a project and I'm doing Godzilla, and someone comes along and is like, oh, they're doing Godzilla, I want to work on Godzilla, they're hiring for Godzilla, I better go and make a giant freaking lizard smash through a building. And then I go and I look at that work and I'm like, wow, we're looking for someone who can do a giant lizard smashing through a building, and that reel demonstrates exactly that. That makes that person a shoo-in for the job. So as a studio, with Catastrophic and other studios I've managed, that's always been a key thing, that if we're applying for work, if we're making contact with a new client, if they're a car place They do car commercials and a lot of that, like photoreal cars, a lot of beauty shots. I'm not going to send architectural visualization to them. I'm not going to send my game cinematic reel. I'm going to cut a reel specifically for them to demonstrate that we're the right person. In other words, when everyone else is sending a reel that's got logo idents on it, it's got motion graphics, it's got all these different bits and pieces to show off how great that studio is and all the amazing things they can do, that's awesome. But that client is only looking for, can you do the job? Can you do the car commercials that we need? Because that's all they're looking for. They have a problem, they're looking for a solution. That's what hiring is. It's literally checking a box. And I hate to dumb it down to that, but that's what we're needing. We have 1,000 other people to hire. We just want to tick that box, move on to the other 999 problems that we have. So again, when I cut a reel for a studio, I'm going to cut one specifically for them that's going to raise me to the top of the pile, because I'm saying I am able to provide a solution for the problem you have. You need a building being destroyed? Well, guess what? Here is a reel showing me destroying a building. So the other part of, like, if I were to start out today, if I wanted to get a job right away, I'll be learning specifically what I need to make a demo reel. And that demo reel will be specifically for the studio that I'm applying for. Okay, so the key thing is that if you want to get into 3D, it's a very big world and it's very intimidating to think of all the studios out there. But again, if our focus is just to get that first initial win, and by the way, I'll do a lot of Q&A at the end, so I'll answer these as at the very end of it. But if I were to get the solution, I want to get that job, that first win altogether, then I'm going to look at who I want that to be. And I think that's where we really need to kind of understand the landscape that we're working at. Am I going to go to where the work is? In other words, do I want to go to Vancouver or somewhere that has a lot of studios and immerse myself in that environment? Or do I want to work at a studio who's local? In other words, I'm not ready to move to another place, so I decide I want to work at one of the studios in my city. So hopefully there's at least a couple. And I think a lot of us, I just want to mention this because it's the number one excuse I hear all the time, there's no studios in my city. There's TV stations, there's 3D print places, there's design places. I think that there's a lot of us who just think that we're too good for them when we're starting out. And like I said, it's all about getting that initial win. It doesn't matter where it is, it's about getting employed work, getting experience, being able to say that I'm employed in this job, and then you can leverage that and start to move to the next place, and start to move your way up. Okay, so no job should be good enough for you at the very beginning. It's all about getting that initial win. So in the beginning, if you were to look local and say, well, I just want to apply at a local studio, that's fine. Research who they are, look at what they're doing, what kind of software are they using, who are the people that work there. LinkedIn, all these different websites allow you to find all this information out. It's very easy to find out what software they're using, because if you look at the job applications, they're going to mention, we're looking for someone who uses Lightwave. Hopefully not. No one uses Lightwave anymore. But they're going to say, we're looking for this. These are the requirements. This is what you need to model. So in other words, if you say, I'm going to learn Maya inside out, it's the same thing if you say, I'm going to learn 3D. If you're trying to get a result, it's about modeling the place that you want. In other words, mimicking the requirements. Because when they give you the job requirements, and it might not even be for the specific position you're applying for, but it gives you a better understanding of what to look for. More importantly, by going on LinkedIn, you can literally look at all the people who've worked there before. You type in the studio, you can look at anyone who doesn't even work there anymore. They could have gone on to another studio, but you can see what position they worked in, what their duties were, what the type of work they were doing was. And it's so easy from there to then look at their website, start stalking those people. It sounds kind of crazy, but this is what you should be doing. Instead of getting frustrated, spending months on a reel that's not good enough, get the written recipe. Because if I had a cheat sheet, if I literally had a bulleted thing saying, forget all the other stuff that I wasted my entire life, day and night working on, all I needed was this, and this, then all you got to do is follow the steps. That's why I like cooking, because cooking's fun. You follow the steps, and then from there you can say, well, what else can I do? What if I threw in some of this? What if I threw in a bit of that? But when you have that, you're not going to ever need to worry about wasting time trying to figure it out, getting rejected, burning your food, whatever analogy you want to use. But the key thing is, by going on LinkedIn, all these other places, you can look at what those artists were doing. You could look at an old demo reel of theirs. What was their junior reel like? a lot of people still have their old crap floating around the internet. So all you got to do is go online, start stalking a few people who used to work at that studio or who still do. I mean, when I went to Blur, one of the directors there, Dave Wilson, his demo reel is still floating around the web somewhere, and like from 96, 97. And one day I want to throw it, not throw in his face, but like I want to show it to him just so he can blush a little bit, because that stuff's around, and all it takes is you to dig it up and say, well, okay, this was the level of quality that they were able to put out back in 2015 or 2002 when they got a job there. So I got to mimic that or better. Okay, so that is the bare minimum, the MVP, the minimum viable product that I should mimic when I'm trying to do this too. So again, it's just about modeling that, thinking about what others are doing so that way you can do it too. The other thing is that just doing your online research for a local studio, like doing all these things, that's one thing, but you should be contacting these people too. It doesn't hurt to reach out to someone and say, hey, I really like the work of this studio, like what would it take to get in there? What's the key thing that you're looking for in an artist? Most people are willing to take someone under their wing, as long as you're not trying to send them your life story, a picture of your dog. Trust me, I get enough of those in my email. But if you were just to send them a nice email that's compacted enough and just say, like, look, here's who I am, I love you guys' work, I want to work for you, I just want to know, like, what's the, what does the typical candidate look like for you? What's the ideal person for you? Or contact another artist, like find them on Facebook, who cares? Like, what's the worst that's going to happen? You message someone and say, hey, I had a quick question, or hey, don't say look at my demo reel, because I get them daily, and that's a little bit different because it's another selfish thing. But when you're trying to compliment them and do an innocent question, it's very easy, especially when it's about them. If you make the email about them, most people are going to respond. If you make the email about you and what they can do for you, they're less likely to respond. Like, that is the dumbed down science to how to get someone to reply to you, is make it about them. Make it genuine. Show that you put in the effort not to make it convoluted, and that's all it's going to take. And you're not going to get a 100% success rate, but the more you do this, two things are going to happen. One, you're going to start to get responses. Two, you're going to realize, wow, it isn't actually that as difficult as I thought. Because a lot of us are scared. I saw it yesterday when I mentioned go network, go ask someone questions. A lot of people were like, wow, like that, people aren't going to reply to me. Like, insert whatever excuse not to try in the first place. This is where you've got to put in the work. At the beginning, it's going to be very difficult. The more you do this, the easier it gets, the momentum you build. Okay, so I think that's really critical. The other thing is that that's online. Go offline. Start calling up. Ask them for a tour of their studio. Just say, hey, I'm a 3D student and I was curious, like, do you ever allow tours through your office or whatever? You never know what could happen, but the thing is that you've got to network, you've got to get out there, and the more you do it, the easier it gets, but the bigger thing is the connections you'll build. All it takes is one or two people to take you under their wing, or to have that connection for when you finally do of your reel, and then you're golden. The other thing is that if you were willing to say, you know what, I'm going to save up some money, I'm going to do 2 or 3 weeks in LA or Vancouver or whatever city I want to work in, you're willing to go out there and immerse yourself in that environment, you can do it all there, and obviously more studios, more chances. Okay, if you play the numbers game, let's say 10% are actually going to say, yeah, come in for a chat, or yeah, here's some advice, and you establish that relationship. 10% of 1,000 people or 10% of 100 people, obviously the numbers are going to be different. So the more you do this in a bigger city, the more opportunities you have. The other thing about that is just the fact that the more you do that, actually go to where the work is, the more chance you are to able to interact with them, find hangouts and things like that. So in other words, a lot of studios might organize industry drinks, or they might have a local bar. It sounds kind of crazy, but if you start hanging out at those bars, you're going to get to know people. In LA, it happened all the time. I'd be at a bar, someone would come up and be like, hey, can you look at my reel? And it's just like, oh, God damn it. Yes, I'll look at your reel. And there's one person I actually hired who did that. He had his reel on his iPhone, and he recognized who I was, and he's like, hey, Allan, sorry to bother you, it'll only take a second, but I was wondering, can you look at my reel? And I ended up hiring that person for a project down the line. I've worked with him actually at a few different studios since then. So it sounds crazy, but the more you do this, the more you're like, okay, like anything's possible, but as I always say, you got to be in it to win it. In other words, you've actually got to put in the effort. And it's natural for us to build an excuse like, well, that wouldn't work, so that way we don't have to try. But as I always see, the ones who actually go and do it, get out of their comfort zone and try, usually the ones who actually get that success. Everyone else is frustrated and the industry sucks because they weren't willing to actually go and do what no one else was doing. Again, if you're playing numbers, when you got 10,000 students trying to get your job and you're all going through the same way, the one person who's over here doing it differently is going to stand out. They're going to be trying different things to everyone else and increase their opportunities of actually getting that initial job. So I think that's really critical to think about too. Even just recently, one of my students in my mentorship, I told him, go to Vancouver, and what was the expression I used? I said, hustle like a motherfucker. I said, just get there, whatever it takes to actually get to Vancouver, and hustle like a motherfucker. He emailed me a couple of weeks ago and he said, hey Allan, I hustled like a motherfucker and I just landed a job at Method Studios. And literally this Monday, I haven't checked in with him yet, but he just started his first job in the industry at Method. And he'd basically been waiting the last couple of weeks for his visa to come through. And being in that environment, he was able to show up at the studios, show up at the events, industry, drink nights, all that stuff. Another one of my students, he just started, I think 4 weeks ago now at Scanline VFX. And I was chatting with him on Skype and I was like, yeah, how'd it go? Like, what did you do? And he's basically mentioning on the podcast, you mentioned this, this, and this. I went and did that. I ended up reaching out to a couple of people via LinkedIn and built a bit of a relationship with them. Didn't really get anywhere, but then, exactly what I mentioned before, he had his reel on his iPhone. The COO of Scanline was at this industry event thing. He showed him his reel and the guy's like, wow, this is awesome. Can I show it to everyone else at the studio? And he's like, yeah, duh, like, please. And it took a little while. It wasn't like he got hired right away. It was about 3 months later, but he finally got his job. And he's been there for 4 weeks, killing it, working on something cool that he wasn't able to tell me about. So I'm kind of curious now. But again, you've just got to do the work. So, I'm throwing a lot at you, and again, I'm going to do a bit of Q&A in a moment, but I'm hoping this makes sense, right? Like, are you getting this stuff? Because this is what's important, is to have those two levers, to have your reel and have the relationships. Because again, where are you going to send your reel or who you're going to show it to once you've done it, okay? So I always say you could be the greatest artist on the entire planet, but if no one knows who you are, how are you going to get the work? In other words, if you're not going to have a platform to be able to, or a contact list to be able to show your work, how are you going to get it? So again, I think that's just really critical. Looping back to the learning for a second, because I think that's the other thing too to think about, is that when it comes to learning, a lot of the time, like if I were to use the analogy before, like I'm going to make 2 shots for my reel, the building destruction, I'm going to say it again, vfxcourse.com, if you go there's 1 shot. And I'm saying that as an example. There's 1 shot. You just follow the steps and you got a finished live action visual effects shot. But the other thing is like, okay, well, let's say I want to have a car crash into a building. All it takes is going on freaking Google, okay? I think that's the thing that surprises me the most. I always say learn with intent. In other words, don't go learn thinking particles inside out. Go learn car rigging because I want to rig a car. Go learn how to do deformations or soft bodies for it because I think that's probably how I'm going to make the car deform when it hits the wall. So go look at that. What else do I need to do? I mean, I'm doing it today. I'm jumping to some new software and it's like, all right, well, here's a list of what I need to do. So I got to figure that out. I'm not waiting around for someone to come and tell me the solution. I'm going on Google, okay, and just looking through a couple of clips, wasting my time, and then I find one. It's like, all right, here's how you do deformations. It mightn't be exactly what I need, but it's going to solve the problem right away. And I've been able to learn any software very quickly just by going on, figuring out like, these are the things I need to do, how do I do them? Most of us are waiting for that one tutorial that's going to say, here's how to drive a car smashing into a wall. And until we see that, we're just like, all right, well, it can't be done until there's a tutorial. Instead of just breaking it down, what does it look like? Okay, I need a car moving from here to here. I need to do collisions. Like, write down that list of what it is that you need, and bit by bit, start Googling that stuff and finding like what little tutorial. It might be crappy, it might be low resolution, but if it's telling you that one little thing, bit by bit, you scotch tape all those things together and then you have your solution. So again, like I'm hoping this is making sense for you. Like, as much as we want to make it fancy and glamorous, it's just putting in the work, putting in the time, and that's all you need. So again, intent-based learning. Just to recap, if I'm going to start my career in 2019 from scratch today, I'm not going to learn everything. I'm going to know like whatever I've learned so far, but I'm going to say, first goal is to know enough, but the second goal is to make a reel. My reel, if it means that I'm learning specifically with the intent of those 2-3 shots that I need to get me a job, then that's the next phase, is to say, well, what are those shots going to be? What do they require? What do I need? What are the requirements? What is the studio looking for? And again, that's where you just go do your research, go look online, look at the work on their reel, look at the type of work they do, look on LinkedIn at the type of artists they hire, look at those artist demo reels, and start to back when they engineer the requirements that you need. You're doing modeling. People do this in business all the time. They say, I want to work at this company, or I want to build a company like this one. So you model its success, you follow in those footsteps, and then you get the job. But if you're just doing a bit of everything and wondering like, why am I not hitting the mark? It's because you're not laser focused. When you're able to make that reel that specifically says, I'm the right person for that role that you need, because I put in the research and I've honed myself, I've learned exactly what I need to do the job, and then from there you branch out. Like I said, you get through the first job, you make that initial landing the job, and then you do the damage. So you got to be creative with that too. Think about like just applying for a 3D position is one thing, but again, no job should be beneath you. So in other words, if you were to start thinking more creatively about this, look at what other jobs are around, like see what else is available. Maybe they do internships. Maybe they would have a render wrangling job. I always get really annoyed when we hire a render wrangler, in other words, like a render farm manager. They get paid minimum wage to come in. Their job is just to sit there all night long and just make sure that nothing crashes. If the job crashes, hit restart. That's typically what they're going to do. And it would always annoy me when someone would come along and do that, and all that would happen is they would just sit there playing video games, sleep on the couch, and they would do the minimum effort required. The one time, this is actually a little brother of someone at Weta, like one of the original Lord of the Rings, like Fellowship of the Ring guys. What he did was different, and I was only 18 at the time, but like it always stuck with me. He would just be doing 3D the whole time. He would just be working on something cool. And then when James Whitlam, the head of 3D, came in the morning, and he's about to go home for the day at 9 a.m. because you're doing a graveyard shift, he would show him. He'd say, by the way, here's what I did last night. And like day 1, day 2, day 3, after like 4 or 5 days of that render wrangling job, you're having FaceTime with the person who actually hires or decides who's going to get the job, who we need for something. And when you're seeing someone just getting better every single day, putting in the effort, it became a no-brainer. Like, wow, like I'm seeing your skills increase all the time. Like, this is really cool. Why don't we offer him a job? Why don't we offer her a job? And having that FaceTime is all it takes. So even if it is that your job is valet, because there are studios in LA that have a valet person, like Zoic, for instance, that would park the client's cars, because again, it's all about making the person who's giving you $600,000 for a project feel special. That's why you have a client service person to fetch them a coffee, you have nice couches, all of these things just to make them feel special, because at the end of the day, they're the people who are paying your bills. So having a valet is a nice touch. That person who's parking those cars, that person is going to get to know every single person in the building, because they're literally getting to see them day in, day out. So one version of this is that valet person is going to be like, this is a shitty job. I want to be working in the studio. This is temporary. I'm just going to go back and work on my reel. The other person is going to say, you know what? I'm just going to get to know everyone. I'm going to try and learn as much as I can. I'm going to do the best job I can. Obviously, everyone knows that my career is going to end here. I've got future bigger things I want to do. Maybe the more I get to know people on my lunch break, I might be able to chat to them, and I can even mention like, I want to do 3D animation. And bit by bit, those people you're getting FaceTime with, they're going to get to know you, like you, trust you. And if you say, you know what, like, I don't mean to bother you, but I've been working on a new reel. I was wondering if you could take 2 seconds while we're having lunch and just give me some tips. And bit by bit, that as long as you're applying what they say. I hate when I write someone a long email or talk to someone in person and say, do this, and then a month, 2 months go by and they haven't even done anything. Then I don't want to ever spend the time and effort and energy to help them again. But when they do, when they come back and say, I did everything you said, now what? Then I'm going to say, well, okay, cool. Now we're going to try this. Now work on this. How about you change this? And bit by bit, as that person's work is getting better, you're more likely to say, you know what, like, this is really cool. Like, do you mind if I show the head of 3D? I think that she or he would just be blown away by it. And they would willingly want to do that at that point. Say, hey, you know what, that valet person, they've been like working 3D. I'm kind of coaching them a little bit. Their stuff's kind of cool. Like, check this out real quick. And that's just one of 1,000 examples of FaceTime. As in other words, getting in and then you course correct, rather than saying, well, I've got to do what everyone else is doing. Go to school, cut a reel, fire it out. If I don't hear anything, cut in your reel, fire it out. Do what everyone else isn't doing. Put in the extra effort, and that's how you rise above the noise. Again, I hope this is resonating. If you guys can hit like, again, I'm saying that because I want to know if this is something that is resonating, so if you can tap like or do whatever it is that you do. But for me, I just want to get an idea of where my time can go, and if it is to putting live streams together every day. In other words, for you guys, if this is applicable, let me know, and I'm more than happy to do more of these. Okay? So, moving on, because I want to go through this really quick and pick up the pace a bit. As I mentioned, you know, I think the key thing is that you want to build a network. I've established that. We always talked about it yesterday. And, you know, I look at, for me, what it took was, especially without the internet, I had to go offline. When I say you've got the online and offline, thanks for the likes, guys. When I get the offline and online, you've got all these different ways to approach people, and I've just mentioned a couple of many. But for me, it would be, there was no internet. I was a little teenager, but I was obsessed with trying to work in games. Like, for me, the idea of waking up in the morning and going to a studio where all these talented people got to like make a video game, like at the time, that was a dream for me. I was just like, wow, like, can you imagine what that would be like? And even today, like getting to go work on a cool movie with people that I've known and worked with like on and off for 20 years, that is a dream come true. There's stressful times just like any other job, but I love what I do, and I'm hoping you guys do too. So for me at the time, that dream, the only way I could think of was like, I've got to get to know all these people. I know who some of the people are. I've looked on, there wasn't LinkedIn, but I've go to their website or whatever. I was obsessed with this one studio. So when I'd read everything I could about them, I would look at, the CEO of this game studio in Australia is going to be at this gaming event to promote the game. I would go to that event, 14-year-old kid. And again, like at the time, everyone's telling me you're crazy. Get a real job, pick a real career. No one's going to hire a teenager. So for me, like I had all these doubts in the back of my mind. Like, what if they're true? Like, what if I'm wasting all my time? I'm not hanging with my friends. I'm literally just rendering all night until it's daylight. When I hear the birds chirping, it's like, crap, work harder because I got to get my renders on the, to go before I go to sleep. And if I'm putting all this time and everyone's right, everyone's telling me I should give up, what if it's true? So I wanted to find out from the source. I wanted a job at this game studio in Australia, and everyone told me just to give up, to go back to school and to pick a real career. Art's not a real job. So I went to this art event. I waited for the right moment when Greg Lane, the CEO of this game studio, he was standing by himself, and a 14-year-old kid, I walked up and I said, "Hi, I'm Allan, and I really want to work at your studio. I'm a 3D artist, and I just wanted to know if there's like any age restrictions. Would you ever hire someone who's a teenager?" And he just turns, he's like, "If you're good, we'll hire you. It's as simple as that." And I remember running home as fast as I could. For me, it's just like everything everyone had told me at that point could fuck off. Like I got the energy back. I was like, no, like the person who was literally in charge of the company just said they would hire me if I'm good enough. All I got to do now is be good enough. So I had that fire into my butt. I went back and I did it. And I ran home. I would stop. I'd be out of breath, and I'd keep running again. And I'd get back to my desk, and I would just start working day and night, working on a new reel, trying to get that job. But most of us are not going to do that. Most of us are not going to show up at an event, go and ask the boss, "Hey, what is it going to take for me to get a job here?" But that's what it takes. So I've mentioned this on my podcast a lot, but like this is just a great example. Was there's this girl, Laura. She was a student at school, and she decided that she wanted to work in games as well, different studio altogether. But what she did is she organized an industry event. She told everyone, hey, come to this event. We're going to be, getting all the game studios, the TV houses, the film places all together. We're going to drink. It's going to be fun. When enough people said, yeah, I'll come to that, that's when she went to Discrete, which Autodesk owns now, and a hardware company that was there. I forget which hardware company. And she's like, hey, all these people are going to be showing up there. Would you put together a bar tab? And they're like, okay, yeah, if there's like 500 people or 200 people, whatever it was, showing up at this thing, then yeah, we'll put together like a couple of $1,000 bar tab. That'd be cool. She's organizing all this stuff to get everyone together. She's not calling people up saying, hi, I want a job. I'm working on my reel, but where do I send it? She's saying, hey, everyone, come to this event. And all she did is she went around saying, I'm Laura. I think it was Lauren, actually. Apologizes. I'm Lauren. And just went around meeting everyone. I remember meeting her at that thing. I spoke to her briefly at the bar while I'm waiting for a drink, and I was like, you put this together, like, congratulations, this is really cool. I've done that before, and it's always worked out really well, and seeing someone who's not even in the industry yet, who just loves what they do so much that they did this themselves, it was really awesome. And I always thought about that. I was like, it was a really cool event, she did a good job, and it wasn't until, it might have been like 8 years later, I came into a meeting at this big game studio back in Australia. I'd been living in LA and all these other places. I came in because we were going to land this $1 million game cinematic. It was for Warhammer. I've worked on a few Warhammers, but this was one through my company, and I was really excited for this thing. And I came in, and I remember the producer who came up to me. She shook my hand, and she's like, "You're Allan." And I was like, "Yeah, hey, how's it going?" She's like, "Do you remember me?" And I'm like, "I don't." And then she's like, "I met you at this event I put on, blah, blah, blah." I was like, "Wow, okay, so what have you been doing?" She's like, "I've been working here the whole time." So what happened was her putting together that event, she met everyone, she didn't get a job right away, but eventually a production assistant or coordinator position opened up, and they're like, "Wow, that Lauren, she did such a good job of putting together that event, making it all happen. Like, she showed so much initiative. Why don't we bring her in and see what she can do?" And that's all it takes. It takes you getting off your ass and going and doing something that no one else is doing, and instantly you have the attention of everyone. When everyone's coming to your event, you're the star of the show. And it's not that hard to do. I've done it 100 times. Go to a bar, say, "Hey, if I bring 200 people here, will you give us discounted drinks? Or will you do whatever?" Then you go to the 200 people and say, "Hey, I've got this venue and they're going to give us discounted drinks all night long." Everyone's going to be like, "Hell yeah, Friday night, let's do this." It doesn't take much to do the effort. And the thing is that a lot of you are not going to do it. So the few of you who do are going to have all that attention. You're going to have that advantage. So I use this as an example. I mention these things because just like that kid who would go to Santa Monica, he recognizes me at a bar, and then I've had a bunch of them where they come up and say, "Hey, I'm so-and-so, really sorry to bother you, but would you look at my reel?" I'll tell you one really cool story. I was at a bar. It was actually the same bar, but it was right next to all the studios, and these four guys just showed up one night, and they're standing there in the middle of the bar. It looked really weird and awkward, and they're like, "Allan, so-and-so texted us saying that they saw you at this bar, and we have this really cool commercial we want you to work on." And I mention this because I told a friend recently how I've said no to so many studios because I'm just like, I've got enough going on, things are good. And then all it takes is someone doing something like that where I'm like, you guys are freaking cool. Like, I don't care what the job is, and it wasn't exciting. It was a Turtle Beach headphone commercial. Like, it was pretty bad, but that's just it. Like, them showing up at a bar and buying some drinks for me and saying, "We heard you're here, we want to meet you and hang out." To me, I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll do the job. I don't care. That sounds fun. Opposed to, "Hey, come in and work for us," when wherever you're at in your career, like maybe you got too much going on and you're less likely to bite the bullet. So again, it goes both ways, but I always think of those things, like just where someone put in the effort where no one else did, and how much of a change that makes. So again, like just to kind of talk about this a little bit more, but internships and render wrangling, all these things are just initiatives that you could come in and have FaceTime with the people who are going to be running projects, hiring people. And the more you get to know all these people, the more opportunities you have. So I mentioned this yesterday, I think, but the only time I've ever been fired in my entire life, I was 17 years old, and it sucked. It really like mentally screwed me up a bit, just because it was a bad situation. And you know, the thing was that I already had a job lined up before I left the building. In other words, I'd gotten to know so many people over, you know, the last few years, that all I did is called up another studio and I was like, hey, you know what, that job that I turned you guys down and I took a job here, it didn't work out. And they're like, okay, well, when do you want to start? And I loved it. They didn't even ask me like, did you get fired or what happened? They were just like, great, when can you start? And there's nothing better than knowing that job security, that even if you got a full-time job and you're like, none of this career stuff matters, it does, because what happens if you get laid off? What happens if they go under? Anything could happen, and to know that you've got a Rolodex of people you can call up and be like, hey, anything going on? That's all it takes. So keep that in mind. Again, you know, do what everyone else isn't doing. The final thing I'll mention, just as an example, is at ILM, there's a Starbucks right next to it. And if I were starting out, I would go to that freaking Starbucks and I would hang out. And maybe if I'm young enough, I wouldn't do it as an older person, like 40 or 30, just because I'd look a bit weird. But if I were a teenager, I think I could get away with it. I would just go up to a few rando people, because you can hear what everyone's talking about. You know who the 3D people are. You can see them a mile away. And I would just say, hey, if I, you know, can I buy your coffee? And in return, you just give me some critiques on my reel. Like, anything you want to do. But someone, like, if someone did that to me, I'd be like, wow, that's ballsy. Hell yeah, I'm in. So again, just be creative. The more creative you are, the more you're going to stand out. So I'm going to go through this very quickly. For anyone joining, I'm going to be doing these every day moving forward, as long as you are engaging and you do find this valuable. So again, thanks for the likes. I can see them popping up. That's awesome. If you find this valuable, please take a moment to share this too. I'd love for this to, again, just to know that if you find it valuable, I'll be doing more of these. So the other part is that the more you build your network, the more you make friends, the more critical it is. So you're going to have friends. If you go online, even if it isn't calling up studios, if you're just going on CG Talk or ArtStation, Facebook groups, and getting to know everyone, talking to them, that's what I was doing in the beginning. You're going to build up a network. I was in IRC. Thanks for the likes, guys. I was in IRC, just like tapping away, getting to know people, and a lot of those people I ended up working with later on. And the more you talk with these guys, the more you got to think about like where they're going to be down the line. I talked about that yesterday. You never know where they're going to end up. And you got to think about, like, if you're going on there and you're answering questions or you're trying to help other people out, some of those people might be at studios already, or they might end up at ones. And all it takes is for one of them to be like, hey, you know what, like, we're actually looking for someone. Do you want the job? Or do you want to send in your reel? I'll make sure it gets looked at. My fiancée, Christina, she does vehicle wraps, and she got to know one of the guys in Shark Tank. And this is really cool that she's always put in the work to show off her work on Instagram, stuff like that. And one of the guys in Shark Tank was like, it's Damon John's birthday tomorrow. If you mock up like a really cool car design for him, I promise you I'll make sure that he gets to see it. And so Damon John's like commenting on her stuff. And she's doing like, all these celebrity things now, and she's just doing the same thing over and over. Putting in the work where no one else is, and she's crushing it. I can't talk about which celebrity she's wrapping his Lamborghini and Ferrari right now, but like, I'm so proud of her, because I'm like, you're crushing it. Like, everyone knows who you are. Whenever I go to her events, you know, no one knows who I am, but they're like, oh, it's Christina, and she's the one being escorted to the front, and I'm like the plus one walking along. And it's so surreal, but like, that's what it takes. Like, her is doing that. Like, she's only been doing this a couple of years, and she's a name brand. But it's because she networked, she got to know everyone, and those people rose up, and they're like, Christina's the best all the time. So then everyone's like, well, who is this Christina person? So again, the more that you get to know everyone, those people are going to go to studios. You're going to go to lunch with them and just hang out. And when you cut your reel and it looks good enough that they're not going to be embarrassed to show it to someone, they'll do it, because it's going to make them look good by saying, here's my friend, they're really talented. So again, it's all about that outreach. So I think at this point, you know, I've kind of beat that to death a little bit. I just really think it's so critical. And again, I say it because I know a lot of us don't do it. We'll hear it and be like, that sounds cool, but I don't want to be emailing people every day and doing all this stuff. But that's what it takes. That's what I do every day. So I think that's yeah, the really critical thing is just about getting that initial win. And like I said, like everything we do works in phases. So in other words, phase one is just get in. Phase two would be to actually get into the job that you want. One of my friends, he actually he's one of my old students. He contacted me and he's like, hey, I've been applying for jobs. No one's hiring me for effects. I got offered a camera tracking job or a compositing job. What should I do? And I was like, take the camera tracking job because they'll be able to move you into effects once you prove yourself. If you're in compositing, no one's going to really care as much to help you because they're losing someone from their department. So they're not going to reward that. But that was it. Like, he couldn't get the effects position right away, but as long as he was in the studio, it meant that from there, he could start to work on his effects at nighttime and in the mornings, and he could show it to the effects supervisor. The effects supervisor's like, wow, can you do some of this? Can you do some of that? And it wasn't like you've got to apply for a job at that point. You're in. The Trojan horse is inside. So that's exactly it. It's just, as long as you're showing the initiative, it doesn't matter how you get in. I've talked about this person before, but a friend of mine, Kate, in fact, I use this example all the time because it's so good. Kate wanted to get a job at the studio Cutting Edge in Brisbane, Australia, and she applied a lot as a compositor. They didn't hire her because she had no experience, so she came in as a client service person. She'd fetch coffee, you know, just run around. She had a walkie-talkie that she'd be like answering and chasing everyone down, getting what they need. Thing is that she would get to know everyone. All the important people are the people that she's serving and trying to impress. So as long as she communicated her needs, that one day I want to leave client service and work as a compositor, they're more than willing to help her because she's paid her dues. She's done the work. So you got to think about that, with her it took a year and then she became a junior compositor, whereas maybe before they wouldn't have rolled the dice and gambled on her not having any experience. So from there she went to a mid-level senior. Within 2 years she left Australia, moved to Montreal, worked on, you know, a bunch of okay movies like Final Destination 3 and all these other things, but she was making it. Like, bit by bit her career took off because she was willing to do what others weren't. Everyone else is like, I'm not taking a client service job, I'm a 3D artist or I'm a compositor. So again, by doing that, you're putting yourself out there, and that's the key opportunity that you want to make. Other thing to think about is that, you know, the software isn't important, because I think a lot of us get really caught up on, well, this studio Double Negative is using Houdini and Nuke and all I know is After Effects. You got to think about like your target market right now, okay? Who are you trying to get that first win with? So I won't go on too much longer than this. I will do a little bit of Q&A right after this though. But if I'm modeling a local studio, in other words, if I'm trying to get a job at a local studio, I don't care what Framestore uses or whoever. I care about what that job, that initial win, the Trojan horse that I'm trying to be, I care about what they use because I'm trying to align myself with them. If I'm learning After Effects and I learn color theory, I learn how to use Mocha to track, I learn how to use the Kia or Primate to be able to key shots and do garbage mats, bit by bit, if I learn all those things, guess what? I can then go to Nuke, I can go to Fusion, I can jump in different software packages and apply the same stuff. When I went to ILM, they're like, can you code in Python and C++? And I'm like, I haven't used C++ since like Boyle and C days in the 90s. Like, for me, I was like, look, I don't know Python, I know MaxScript, I know enough that they are very similar structurally. If you need me to learn Python, I'll learn it. That was all they needed. They're like, all right, good enough for us. But having the knowledge, if I said I don't know how to script, it might have been a massive difference. So in other words, the software doesn't matter. It's about meeting the criteria. As long as you got the skills, you can apply that anywhere you want. So as long as I'm aligning myself with, hey, local studio requires us to know After Effects and Cinema 4D or whatever, then that's what I should be doing because my laser focus is to get in there and I'm modeling myself based on what their needs are. Okay, so does that make sense with you guys? Right? So in other words, if I'm going to New York, I'm not going to learn Maya. I'm not going to learn 3ds Max. They use all those software, but you know, New York primarily, with the exception of Fuse and Framestore, are mostly all motion graphic studios. So Cinema 4D, After Effects, that's a shoo-in. Okay, that's going to get me a job at 80-70% of all the studios in New York City. If I know, you know, other software packages, then that's cool. Maybe I can go to PsyOp or a couple of other ones, but the one that's really going to move the needle Like what everyone's posting jobs for is this. So therefore I need to learn that to open up my options. Again, it's a model, what's required. I don't care what Hollywood's using if I'm trying to get my first job in advertising or motion graphics or whatever it might be. So again, I'm going to do a Q&A in a moment. But like I said before, like my first, 2 weeks at a studio, once I got in, I learned more in that time than anything else. And I look at our career as momentum, right? So in other words, at the very beginning, it is hard as fuck. I'm not going to lie. Like getting that first job, like you're going to get the rejection. Most of us don't get the first job easy. I didn't. I nearly quit before I even started. But once I got in, I never not got work ever again. But I made sure I'd be on my lunch breaks, knocking on doors, cut a new reel once I had enough stuff, and I'd go around to Animal Logic and all these other studios, and I'd talk to them, get to know everyone. I'm still happy at the studio I was at, but I was making sure I had options. And then from there, when it was time, I went to the other studios, I doubled my rate, and I was able to work on cooler projects and continue to evolve from there. And the thing is that it got easier and easier and easier. And that's what the beauty is, that right now it's going to be really hard, but most of us quit because we're like, oh, this is hard. I expected this to be easy, which nothing worth doing is easy, right? So as it becomes, like, as you get further into your career, not only can you start to detect the BS studios, the ones that don't know how to manage a project right, so you end up working crazy long hours and you hate your job and everything else. And it's not because the VFX industry is bad, it's because at the beginning of your career, you take any job, and there are going to be places that suck. And unfortunately, you're going to eat shit a little bit at the beginning, but once you start getting better and you're actually have a resume you can leverage, then you can start saying, I'm only going to work at Framestore, I'm only going to work at the medium-sized studio. But when the guy comes along saying, hey, we have a project and it's due tomorrow, can you come work for us? You know that they shouldn't be running studios in the first place. They're the ones that give everyone a bad name. So you can avoid them and you can focus on the ones that are good, and then your positive experiences. So in other words, let's say that this graph is your money and how difficult the career is. Bit by bit, your money is going to get higher. Bit by bit, your job is going to get easier. And that's pretty much how the VFX industry works. So in the beginning, it's going to be really difficult and you're going to get paid shit, but it's an investment and it's momentum. Bit by bit, it picks up pace. It gets easier and easier and easier until your career just works for you. And that's when you can just wake up every morning and you're like, I feel like working. Let me go to my inbox and see what job offers are on today. And that's all you need to do in the end, because you've got that network. You know everyone. All your friends are batting for you. They're saying, can we get Allan in? Can we get Chris in? Can we get Sarah in? They're doing the work for you because you've been around long enough. You didn't disqualify yourself at the beginning. So it's all about momentum. You got to remember that. The first job is the hardest, and then it's going to get easier and easier and easier. And that's why I'm saying, just get in the fucking door. Be the Trojan horse, because once you're in, that's when you can course correct, you can start doing that damage. But unless you're in, it's going to still be difficult, right? So I think the key thing is, like, when we're looking to hire someone, it's just, we want someone who can prove they can do the work. That's all we care about in the end. As long as you can do that, then that's all that matters. So just to recap, and I've covered a lot here, but just to recap, because I'm going to go through this just one more time. For me, it was always about, learn with intent. In other words, get a laser-focused reel that can demonstrate exactly that you can do the job. As long as you can prove that you can sit down tomorrow and do the job, in other words, you can take a shot from start to finish. And again, to segue for a second, I'm going to say it, but like VFXcourse.com, I've got a free class that goes through how to take a shot from start to finish. It's entirely free, so I'm not trying to say go buy my shit. I open my mentorship once a year, so it's not open right now. But what I am saying though is that this is a chance for you guys to actually go and have a finished shot that goes on your reel. And that's all it takes, is having that one shot. If there's a studio like Scanline VFX, who they blow up buildings, make a shot that blows up a building, it's a no-brainer, because you're demonstrating what they do. And that means it isn't like, if I hire this person, like, I've seen some tutorial work from theirs, but they never actually finished a shot. Because for me, I want to know I can take a shot from start to final, right? So that is the main thing, is just learn what's actually going to move the needle. Don't learn the software inside out. Learn enough to say, I'm going to make a car crash into a wall. Google the shit out of that or look at courses, whatever it takes to get that done. You got to hustle as much as you can and nurture those relationships. As long as you're doing that 24/7, whether it's online or offline. In other words, building an event, showing up at the door, asking for a studio tour, or being online, talking to people on CG Talk or wherever you crazy kids hang out today, ArtStation, Instagram. Like even at the moment, like there's people I'm reaching out to who I'm just DMing and saying, hey, what's up? Love your work. We should hang out sometime. You know, it doesn't matter like whether I've experienced or not. If someone, you know, is doing an event like on Facebook, they say, hey, I'm going to be at this place. You guys come along, or go to SIGGRAPH. Like that's the offline. Like go to where the people are. Go to a bar, show people you're real. Go to Starbucks, buy someone a coffee if they review your stuff. Then say, cool, do you mind if I email you when I've done what the advice you said? Like it's so easy. I can think of 100 different ways. And mental note for Vera, my assistant, remind me to, when she sees this, remind me to put together maybe an actual list of like, here's 20 different ways that you could go and hustle offline right now. But it's so true. So the key thing is that if you do this, if you build these relationships, you know, even if you haven't got a reel yet, these people, if they get to know you, are probably going to be like, dude, where's your reel? Like you keep talking about it. When you have it, send it to me. Like that's what I did at 14. And when I finally had it, I sent it in and I'm like, it's done, mic drop, give me the job. And that's when they came back like, yeah, it was okay, but not good enough. And that's when I'm like, okay, reel number 2, reel number 3. But I had the people I could send it to. If I didn't have that, I wouldn't know if it was good enough. All I'd hear is, you know, I sent it in, I haven't heard anything yet, what's going on? So always think about that. And do whatever it takes to get in. As I mentioned before, like I'm just reiterating these key points, but be the Trojan horse, be the valet, you know, be the render wrangler, whatever it takes to get in and get that momentum in the beginning. Because the first job's the hardest job. So one key thing I'm just going to mention really quick is that do online courses. That's the best way to learn. Degrees in visual effects are bullshit. If someone was doing YouTube videos and online courses for brain surgery, I wouldn't let them operate my brain. But if they were doing online courses for how to draw and they had a portfolio or a demo reel that said, here's proof that I can draw, that's all I need to see. Because again, I just need proof that they can do the job. That's all it comes down to. So don't worry about the degree. The only place a degree really helps is if you're in another country, and it will help sometimes with your work visa. I've got a whole couple episodes on work permits and visas. I'm going to be doing a talk very soon on immigration for working in the US, Canada, London, New Zealand. I did a podcast interview with James Cameron's immigration lawyer and Peter Jackson's as well for all of Weta. So, you know, all that stuff's online. You can track it all down. So, you know, one thing is, like, if you go and study, like, if you go to Gnomon, it's $108,000 to do a degree, and you're going to be waiting a year or two, and, you know, you might build some cool contacts, you might learn some stuff. I'm not going to talk about the quality of courses so much, but the one thing I will talk about is that all you're doing is you're prolonging getting started, because remember at the very beginning I said that the first 2 weeks on the job is worth more than 5 years before you get in the industry, as long as you go to a good studio. So if you're getting a degree, you're prolonging a year ever getting into the industry. So think of what you will know a year of actually having a job in the industry. You know, the people you'll learn, meet, all these different things, the money you'll be making compared to going and studying something if you can go online and do it. I'd rather go and pick up a few different courses, as long as you have the personality type that you're disciplined enough to learn on your own. Otherwise, schools are great because sometimes you need that structure. You need to go there and be forced to learn because you're not good at doing it on your own. If that's the case, then more power to you. Again, just to wrap this up, because I've thrown so much information at you guys, but you know, hopefully this all makes sense. 2 things I would recommend you guys do. If I'll try and leave these in the description of this video once it goes online, but otherwise just Google it. But I've got a demo reel guide. You just type in like Allan McKay demo reel guide, you'll be able to find it. That also comes with a couple of videos which talk about it too, but that to me is a book that I put together specifically focused on how to cut a demo reel that will land you a job. Only because I've seen all the stuff that was out there and I'm like, this is really damaging. So I wanted to write from the perspective of someone who actually does the hiring, because I think that most people as artists, they just send out their reel and they're like, oh yeah, I got the job, so here's what I think you should do, is really what they should be saying. But they're like, here's what you should do. Tell a story, make your reel 5 minutes long, you know, do all these things that are just screwing you up. So as someone who actually hires people, fires people, builds teams, I wanted to write it from the perspective of that. So get the demo reel guide. I think it's going to help a lot. And again, it's free, so I'm not trying to sell anything. But the other thing was, as I mentioned earlier, is vfxcourse.com, if one of you guys can mention that in the comments as well. Again, the reason I mentioned that is because those are the two things. You need the soft skills and the hard skills. The hard skills are going to be actually demonstrating that you can do the work. So in other words, if you need to blow up a building, vfxcourse.com, you've got to blow up a building in a live action shot, take it start to finish. But then on top of that, you need the soft skills. You need to understand how to present that, how to communicate to everyone, you know, how to make your reel rank on YouTube or wherever you want to post it. These are things to think about, because again, like if you have an online platform, if you have a website people go to and they see your demo reel, if you put your email signature as your demo reel, people are going to click it. So there's all these different things you can do, and the more you do these things, the more you increase your chances of your reel being seen. So like I said, the two levers are that you want to build a killer reel that can prove that you can do the shots, take a shot from start to finish, especially integrate live action and CG if that's what you want to do as film. But the other part of that is that you need the relationships. In other words, you need to be able to have people outside of HR and job application forms where, you know, thousands of students are sending their stuff all the time. You want to have the person you can email and say, here's my stuff. Or you want to have the person at the studio who can get you the job. So a good example is one of my students, my mentorship, got a job at one of the studios in LA, and then from there he went like, this other guy in Allan's course is really cool, we should hire him as well. And Scanline's done that now, Fuse Effects has done that now, I'm trying to think of Encore, Hollywood, Frame Store, MPC, ILM, Weta. So again, like that's the Trojan horse. You get one person in and you're like, doors open, buddies, come on in. And that's where the network comes in, because not only getting to know people in the industry, but think about all the other people. If you're trying really hard to hustle and get your job in the industry, and all these other people are too, I mentioned it yesterday, the barrel of monkeys. One person comes in, you're all hooked together, and you say, my friend's really cool and cheap, bring them in too. So bit by bit, you're bringing in all these other people. So I'm going to leave it there, guys. I'm going to do a little bit of Q&A really quick, but I'm hoping you guys got a lot from this. Like I said, if you can take a moment to share this, that would mean the world to me. If you can like this, just to let me know that this is something you want to see more of. What I'm going to try and do is do these daily. I'll probably start making them a little bit shorter, but I just want to try and hit you guys with as much stuff as I can. I'm not going to do too much Q&A, but I will do a little bit really quick. Hello world, thanks for posting the link to the vfxcourse.com, and I love the name because anyone who's familiar with coding will instantly recognize what that is. So Malcolm was mentioning the VFX breakdown of Star Wars Rogue One. So yeah, the Princess Leia stuff, that was really cool. And you know, yeah, if you guys want to check out that video, that was you know, interesting to talk about all that stuff. So you know, if you guys are interested in work visas, again, like that's something that's really important. So I will definitely talk more about that stuff. If I don't get to your comments, because I'm just going to go through this pretty quick, but I'll definitely try to, you know, cover as much as I can after this as well. But you know, with immigration, my podcast, I've interviewed the top immigration lawyers for Canada, the US, and a few others. I'm going to be putting together a YouTube video pretty soon on how to work in the US, how to get a work visa, everything you need to do. And I just spoke with the top immigration lawyer for O1 visas in the US, Amanda Gillespie in New York's. She's pretty much the best. Like every single person I know who has a work permit in the US, we all know her, because I'd be talking about work visas and someone's like, who do you have? I'm like, I have Amanda. And they're like, yeah, me too. She's the best. And like everyone I know, and I've recommended her so many times. So I just spoke to her again just to see if like Trump has changed anything that we need to know about. So I'm going to be updating that with like the latest and greatest. So yeah, I hope that helps. So I'm just looking through this really quick. So Alex Rodriguez was asking, I'm just learning Blender, is this a good route to take? I've been following Blender since like 2001, I think is the first time I ever heard about it, and I was pretty blown away by the software. I would look at, not is this software the best one to learn, because, that's what I keep communicating here. Don't worry about the software as much as thinking about, what is going to move the needle. Like who is the studio you want to work for? If you look at the studio in your local city, not ILM and Weta, they're, wherever, like, that's the someday goal, but think of who is going to be your first job, and look at the other ones around too. Like, what are they all using? Like in your city, where you want to be. Again, if I were applying for jobs in New York, it's going to be all Cinema 4D. But if I go to London, it might be Houdini and Maya. If I go to LA, it might be Max and a bit of Houdini. So it always changes, but that's just it. Don't think like, well, this software my friend said was the best. Think about what is going to get you that first job, because that is what we're trying to do, is fast track into phase 2. Phase 2 is once we're in, that's when we start to cause havoc. We're going to work our asses off, try to do commercials, cut a new reel from scratch that had a budget, a schedule, and 20 other people touch it. It's going to look 10 times better than your crappy student reel. Trust me. So, that being said, like, I don't use Blender. I've used every other software package except for Blender, but I've seen Blender Guru, who I think is actually from Brisbane, where I'm from, and he's definitely got a massive following. I only found out about him a couple weeks ago. I've been living under a rock, but I look at some of the stuff that comes out of it. It looks great. I don't know of many studios that use it. I know of one in Winnipeg in Canada that we're collaborating with. But, in general, I would just model what you want to work at. Henry, what's up, man? I was just talking about New York. Henry's my brother from New York City. We used to hang out a lot. That's cool. We gotta hang out, man. Cool, guys. So I might leave there because I realized my laptop is about to run out of battery. Hello from Australia. What's up, David? But yeah, I'll definitely chat with you guys more. My name was saying what I think of MPC. MPC's got a bit of a bad rep these days, but I think they do amazing work, and I know plenty of people working there, Cineside, Frame Store. So there's nothing wrong with them. Just again, I think just be cautious, I guess. But I don't mind them. But I know that London, there's been a few issues with the owner. Cool, guys. Yeah, I'm just gonna leave it there, but I'm going to. So VFX Crazy is saying any preferred program for pyro. If you're doing fire explosions, again, I would just model like what studio you want to work at is using that software. That's the best decision. But Pyro effects and Houdini is pretty good. Max is Fume Effects, which is really good, and Phoenix FD. Both of those are used, like Scanline VFX uses Fume and Max exclusively, and like they're doing Star Wars, they're doing Godzilla, doing San Andreas, like every big visual effects sequence you can think of. So it just really depends. And that's the thing too, is like sometimes like you might struggle learning Houdini, let's say, and you end up giving up. But then you go and use Cinema 4D and you're like, Turbulence FD, this is really simple. So as long as you're getting those wins, it's all about momentum. So I'm going to close my laptop just because my battery is pretty much dead. But I think it was JD was asking, you're an animator and you want to switch to VFX and you want to start from the bottom. That's the beauty of our industry, is we don't, like, once you're in, and this is what this whole talk's been about, is like once you're in, it's not about starting from scratch. You'll never have to start in VFX from scratch again. If you're an animator and you want to, like, I remember one of my friends who's like one of the lead or animation supervisors at Illuminate in or Illumination in Paris, like on Minions and all that. Like when I first made my first ever particle effects DVD back in 2004, he ended up doing it just for fun at Blur, and he was doing cool effects with it. And I've seen so many cool animators who were doing effects, just picking it up. And again, I was hanging out with one of the directors from Lucasfilm in Montreal last weekend, and I was talking about that. In fact, it wasn't him; it was one of the ILM animators, Lucas Ridley. We were chatting about this, that like, in a way, effects and animation, like the big things that I really hammer into my students and my mentorship about with effects is learning the principles of animation, because most of them you'll do your effects, they'll be very floaty or they'll look small scale. So you need to learn about like weight distribution, timing, being able to hit the right beats with your effects. So I think it's more about just being able to demonstrate what you're doing, figure out like where you want to work and say, okay, well, how can I leverage what I've got so far? And if you're an animator, maybe you do some animation-based effects. So that way you can have someone running around in the mud or doing really cool magic effects. Because I always think that if you want to demonstrate magic effects, for instance, and sci-fi stuff, you usually want to have character-based effects that go with it. So this could be a way to integrate it and slowly bridge over. One last piece of advice when you're switching industries, like one of my friends, he's a lead lighting artist in LA, and he wanted to get into effects. So what he would do is he started cutting a reel and doing effects work, and he would take on any effects job he could, but eventually he had to play hardball and say, I'm not doing any more lighting jobs, because they're always going to say, well, we've got a lighting position and an effects position. And naturally they're going to say, well, you're a lead lighter, you're a junior effects person. So eventually you had to say, well, look, I'm only taking on like mid-level effects jobs or whatever. So bit by bit, you got to say, all right, I'm now officially this. If you define yourself as one thing, people are going to see you as that. I'm not going to look at someone who used to be a compositor, now they're an effects TD or vice versa, and think, well, you're starting from scratch, because you've got all that knowledge already. And that's the hardest part, is like the experience you have, like that's worth its weight in gold. Experience is everything to me. So, don't look at it like you're starting from scratch. Look at it like you're moving sideways. Leverage what you have, but just start demonstrating it. As long as you can have a reel that shows you can do it, that's all that matters. So I hope that made sense to everyone. Again, I appreciate you guys for taking the time to sit through all this. There's a lot that I went through. But at the same time, this has been a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to reading through the chat, and I'm going to just try to respond to what I can. I did a live recording yesterday. I'm so pissed off about this. I accidentally deleted it. I completely deleted it. It is gone. And I'm pissed because it was such great content, but it was also such a great response from you guys. And it's just because I was testing out this camera today and posting a few tests, and I'm like, delete, and I'm like, wait, where'd that video go? And I'm like, luckily I did record the audio, so I'm going to post it on my podcast pretty soon. So if you missed it, it'll come out on the podcast May 7th, I think, because I'm almost up to 200 episodes now. So the last couple are going to be some pretty awesome ones I'm organizing, including I worked on Avengers Endgame, and I'm going to bring in the creative director. We did the poster for the movie for Marvel. I'm going to be bringing him on, I think May 2nd or 1st, like whenever my birthday is. So that's going to be a fun episode. All right, guys. Again, I'll leave it there. I'm going to do these tomorrow and every other day for the next 30 days. Like I said, it means the world to me if you can share this. More importantly, if you can like and comment, that at least is an indication for me, because I want to see if this is working. If it's not, in other words, like 10 of you are saying, yeah, it was pretty cool, I won't do it. I'll put my time into something else. But if you guys are finding this valuable, let me know, hit the like button, and that at least is indicating to me that yes, people are finding this valuable, do more of it, okay? Yeah, I appreciate the likes, guys. Thank you so much. And I'll be back tomorrow, and if you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I'll respond to whatever I can. And this has been a lot of fun. So again, thank you, everyone.